Worse and happier times before the sisters fell into the clutches of a malicious and murderous Northwest doctor. The pair were vacationing at Victoria's Empress Hotel when they spotted this ad in a local paper and enlisted themselves into the care of a self-proclaimed osteopath, Dr. Linda Burfield Hazard, who was noted for her fasting treatments. It was a deadly decision, as true crime author Greg Olson details in his book, Starvation Heights. Why the Starvation Heights title in the book?
Well, that's what everybody calls it. You know, Shane and Lori's house out there in Olalla is known by the locals and now by a lot of people as Starvation Heights because that's where so many people died from the doctor's revolutionary fasting treatment.
Okay, so what was this doctor like, Dr.
Well, she was something else. I mean, she was a woman, and in some ways ahead of her time, because she had fashioned this incredible business. She wrote these books. She had a following throughout the world, people that would want to come and take this treatment that she had invented, which was basically fasting you to skin and bones to cure you from whatever ails you and then bring you back up to perfect health. That's what she sold.
Interesting. Now, her husband, little different guy, Sam, right?
Yeah, Sam Hazard was really no good. I mean, she was bad enough, but the two of them together made a really dangerous pair, in that Sam was a crook. He had stolen money from the government. He was a West Pointer who had ripped off the government. He had even been involved in a bigamy case with Linda as being one of his wives. So, I mean, he was no good. They both saw this idea of fasting people, fasting them for their money, basically.
So these two wealthy British ladies come to the place for treatment. What kind of treatment do they get? Well, what happens to them?
Well, you know, Claire and Dora Williamson were naive, rich, and that was the combination that led them to this downfall. I mean, they come to Olalla for a treatment that's basically you know, you get a cup of asparagus water. I don't even want to say broth because it's a tip of asparagus boiled in a quart of water. And
that's their food.
That's their food for the entire day. They get that, plus they get these horrendous treatments and these osteopathic treatments. I'm not kidding you.
You're talking like 3-hour enemas, right?
Oh, well, the enemas were bad enough. That's like 6 hours for an enema, if you want to imagine that. 6-hour enema, but also this idea, this massage, that she would lay them down on a board and really just beat them until they were practically passed out. That was her treatment.
So after a couple of weeks of this, what's happening to the sisters? Their minds and everything else?
Oh, they're getting weaker and weaker, and she's telling them, well, you know, you'll feel weak, and then all of a sudden, miraculously, you'll be cured, and you'll have perfect health, you know. And the sisters are afraid, and they're worried, but they also, there's something about Linda Hazard's spirit that convinces them that they ought to continue the treatment.
Bonnie in the audience, go ahead, you have a question?
I'm just wondering how a reasonable person wouldn't try to get out of this situation. What was her stranglehold that would have made people stay and continue with the treatment if she was starving and beating them?
Yeah, it sounds terrible, doesn't it? But if you think about it, in a lot of ways, it's like a cult leader. We have them even today. People that have some sort of a charisma that get people to fall under their sway, and I think Linda was one of those people. She was able to get you to believe. One example was, you know, you were eating canned tomato juice, and she would say, well, I just squeezed that off the vine today. And you'd know she didn't, but somehow you'd drink it and believe that she did. I mean, she was that good.
Well, she must have had some success. I mean, some people who were, yeah, it worked, right?
I don't know how many successful cases she had. Because by my count, at least 40, maybe more, died under this so-called treatment.
So as the sisters are mentally suffering, physically suffering, she gets them to do something with their wills, right?
Right, and this is what she did before. She did this in Minnesota, where she first came. She basically gets them to sign over their assets. And at that time, you know, in today's dollars, these were million-dollar assets they had. They had property in Canada, in Europe, in Australia. They had a lot of money. And when they were very, very weak and close to death, she said, sign this stuff over to me, and they did.
Why would they sign it over to her?
You know, well, she was sort of telling stories. You know, she separated the two sisters. She would tell Dora one thing, she'd tell Claire something else, and then, you know, eventually win them over by pitting them against each other.
Now, Shane and Lori live in this place, this sanitarium. Describe the facility or what it is she was doing.
Right. I mean, it really was just, it's a 1.5-story, you know, Northwest-style bungalow out there in the middle of nowhere, which is Olalla, Washington. You know, it's Kitsap County. It's very remote. The only way to get there is by the mosquito fleet at that time that was running people back and forth. It was a little town, very much out of the way. She promised big things. She promised tennis courts, swimming pool, a big, beautiful building, and immaculate grounds. What she gave them was a little attic bedroom and some cabins.
What about the police or anybody in the town say anything about this?
The Olalla people that lived there at that time were, you know, people of modest means and not much education. And they thought, well, here's a doctor. She's college educated. She knows what she's doing, so we might as well just get out of the way and let her do this.
So the treatments continue. what continues happening to the sisters? They've signed everything over.
Right. I mean, Dr. Hazard is faking everything. She's signing diary entries, you know, saying that when one of them dies, I want my mother's diamonds to go to Dr. Hazard. I want my clothing to go to Dr. Hazard. I want this property I have up in Canada to go to her. She's doing all this back-end stuff, basically preparing for the death of both of these girls.
Now, as they're getting weaker and weaker, at some point, Claire decides she's got to get something out, right? What does she do?
She knows that their number's about up. I mean, she's weak. I mean, think about this. They started about 130 pounds of how much they weigh.
Right. When they started.
When they started. By the time that Claire really knew this is bad news, she's down around 80. Her sister is in worse shape. But oddly, you know, Claire has the wits about her, and she's able to smuggle, we don't know how, smuggle a cable out to her governess. Because she's an orphan. She had her parents were dead. Governess in Australia got this cable that says, get to Olalla and get us out of here.
So they know something wrong. Tasha's on the line from Port Orchard. You got a story about this, Tasha?
Yeah. Me and some of my friends were going up to Starvation Heights once, and we got about halfway up there, and we had found a bone. Well, we weren't sure if it was an animal or a person, so we had taken it back to our house, and a week later it had disappeared.
Well, you found the bone, got it back, and it just disappeared on its own?
Oh, yeah. A week later from when we got back, it had disappeared. And we even moved, and we still haven't found it.
Shane and Lori, any bones found at the house at all?
Not that we're aware of. We haven't found any.
Not human.
Yeah, not
Just out of curiosity, what happened to a lot of these people? I mean, she's estimated to have killed 40 people there. Did they take them out and bury them, or what happened to them?
Well, she actually, you know, these people would basically starve to death. They would waste down to nothing.
Right.
They would die. She would perform the autopsies there in the bathroom. So she'd have them laid out on an ironing board, is how she did this, cut them all up, pronounce them dead of heart failure or some organic disease, never starvation, even though they weighed like 50 pounds.
It's always something else.
Always something else. And she would then have the bodies cremated.
All right, when we come back, a note does get out and a rescue attempt takes place. We'll tell you what happened.